Approximately 18% of the global population is vegetarian, some 6% vegans, and the rest of them follow a non-vegetarian diet. But some people relish the taste of their own species, eating human flesh and blood. This barbaric practice is called cannibalism, which simply refers to the practice of eating humans. This horrifying act has been well recorded in a lot of civilizations across time. Whether you consider the infamous Nithari murders in India or Jeffrey Dahmer from the USA, there was one chilling common factor in them: the consumption of human remains. Cannibalism has been recorded across history in many instances, from the Roman Empire to the 21st century. In recent times, a lot of reports of this terrifying act emerged from Asia, but back in medieval times, Europe was a witness to some of the most notorious acts of cannibalism. To even think that people are killed and eaten is a fearful thought. To think that a continent as rich in culture and sophisticated as Europe has a dark history associated with cannibalism is almost shocking. Today, on History Within Reach, we will dive deep into the history of European cannibalism. Archaeological discoveries have shed light on the presence of cannibalism in Europe over the past 15,000 years, particularly through the lens of Magdalenian culture. Flourishing in northwestern Europe approximately 17,000 to 12,000 years ago, this culture offers crucial insights into ancient practices. Recent studies reveal that cannibalism may have been often ritualistic rather than purely survival-driven. Humans are apex predators, for they are ridiculously creative. And even thousands of years ago, humans realized that only one more species was left to be hunted: humans themselves. Even more disturbing, humans built beliefs that human remains could be used to cure certain diseases and illnesses. Corpse medicine was a notable practice in Europe from ancient times till the early modern period. The practice involved the consumption of human flesh, blood, and body parts for medicinal purposes, and was prevalent among various social classes, including the royalty. The use of human remains for medicinal purposes by the Europeans goes back to the Roman Empire. Healers from the Roman Empire recommended drinking the blood of gladiators as a remedy for various ailments. This belief persisted through the medieval period and into the Renaissance, where the practice became more organized and widespread. And that was not the end of it. There were multiple parts that were used. It's difficult to digest, but it was believed that consuming blood from a freshly killed human could cure ailments like epilepsy. Even human bones were used in this school of medicine. Crushed human bones were used to create tinctures or powders that were believed to help with healing wounds. The Latin Church began its crusade against Islam back in the late 11th century to recapture the Holy Land, Jerusalem. Cases of cannibalism were recorded during the First Crusade. While the Christian sources explain these acts as due to hunger, Amin Maalouf, a Lebanese-born French author, argues that the Crusaders' behavior indicates they might have been driven by a strange obsession rather than, or in addition to, necessity. Even a few centuries after the First Crusade, cannibalism stayed in European societies. The consumption of entrails or body parts of those considered enemies is repeatedly mentioned in local laws, sometimes without any expression of disapproval. In 1672, Dutch magistrate Johan de Witt and his brother Cornelis were lynched and eaten by the enemies upon failing to fend off a French invasion. The brothers were attacked by the civic militia of The Hague, South Holland's chief province, who shot them and left them to the mob. Their naked, mutilated bodies were strung up in the open for the whole crowd to see, while the mob triumphantly roasted and ate their livers. The sheer normality of this incident is bone-chilling and demonstrates how casual cannibalism was in Europe back in the 17th century. Starting in the 16th century, a peculiar type of medical cannibalism emerged in various European nations, where thousands of Egyptian mummies were crushed and marketed as medicinal products. The powdered remains were believed to stop internal bleeding and possess therapeutic benefits. This practice evolved into a thriving industry that continued until the early 18th century. In fact, if this was not enough spine-chilling, there was cannibalism in the world of sailors, practiced when survival was at stake. One of the most infamous incidents happened on the deck of an English ship, Mignonette, back in 1884. The vessel set sail from Southampton, England, but became stranded in the South Atlantic after a storm. The crew, consisting of 4 men, faced dire conditions after being adrift for nearly 3 weeks without sufficient food or water. As starvation set in, the crew discussed the custom of the sea, which involved drawing lots to select a victim for sacrifice. Ultimately, they did not draw lots. Instead, they decided to kill Richard Parker, a cabin boy who was gravely ill. The crew consumed his body over several days, surviving over the dead remains of poor Richard. Though they were rescued more than 2 months after they had set sail from Southampton, they had lost a crew member and something that made them human. What is almost shocking is that cannibalism at sea was often viewed through the lens of necessity and survival. Sailors were known to reference the custom of the sea, which implied that in dire circumstances, cannibalism could be justified if all parties consented or if lots were drawn. This cultural acceptance reflects broader themes of morality and how flexible the concept of morality was for the seafarers. By this time, with growing discourse on human conscience and morality, cannibalism had turned from being a rather common act to something that was supposed to be looked down upon. Still, instances of cannibalism by necessity were recorded during World War II. For example, during the siege of Leningrad, conducted by the German and Finnish forces, reports of cannibalism began to appear in the winter of 1941-1942. By that point, starvation was also being used as psychological torture. Hence, cannibalism was inevitable. And so it did happen, taking place in the concentration and death camps in the independent state of Croatia, which, at that time, was a puppet state of the Nazis. Cannibalism did not lose its necessity for survival even in the 20th century. It was prevalent during the Holodomor, a man-made famine that struck Soviet Ukraine from 1932 to 1933. The majority of cannibalistic acts involved the consumption of the corpses of those who had died from starvation. The practice is known as necrophagy. However, there were also numerous instances of children being murdered for food. Many survivors recounted tales of neighbors who had killed and consumed their own children. One woman, when asked about her actions, explained that her children wouldn't survive anyway, but by doing this, she would. The police arrested her for this crime. Authorities also documented cases of children being kidnapped, killed, and eaten, with reports circulating in various areas about children being hunted for food. As supplies of grain and animal meat dwindled to nearly nothing, a black market for human flesh emerged, which may have even become part of the official economy. To think that a parent would eat their own flesh and blood simply goes on to show the psychological overdrive that starvation led people to and how cannibalism felt like the only feasible way to survive. Today, incidents of cannibalism are rare, but it's still practiced in some parts of the world. There's no doubt in the fact that cannibalism is one of humanity's darkest chapters, a practice born of survival, ritual, and desperation. From ancient rituals to medieval medical remedies and chilling tales of survival, its historical roots reveal an unsettling facet of human nature. While it reflects our capacity for both creativity and cruelty, it serves as a grim reminder of the fragility of morality under extreme circumstances. As we reflect on these haunting episodes, they challenge us to question the limits of human resilience and the ethical boundaries that define us. What's your take on this barbaric practice?